Hey guys, Mrs. Hill here, and I'm back in Lab C6 today because we are going to be doing a frog dissection. That's right, I have my lovely little bullfrog here. Just for those of you teachers that are taking a look, these are double injected bullfrogs. I usually buy the 5 to 6 inch bullfrog because that gives us enough development to be able to see some really good stuff reproductive organ wise. And they're really good size to be able to see some of the other things as well. So we're going to take a look at our bullfrog today. Just safety procedure wise, I am wearing goggles during the lab today, also my apron. You can see I'm wearing gloves. I have super sensitive skin, and so washing my hands multiple times throughout a 2 or 3 day period gets kind of rough on my skin, but gloves are not required. The preservatives that are used these days in frogs really don't require you to use gloves unless it's just something you feel more comfortable with. And then of course, if you have any cuts, scrapes, or anything like that on your hands, you'll definitely want to wear some gloves because those preservatives will burn a little bit if they get into those cuts. In addition to that, I have a wax-lined dissection pan, so the wax really helps out with your T-pens. And then I have my pair of forceps here. I have a pair of dissection scissors. I have a scalpel with a fresh blade, and remember, we're going to be really careful with the scalpel today. It's important to understand this scalpel works a lot like the knife in your kitchen or the pocket knife you may carry when you're at home. The curved side of the blade is the sharp side, so we always want to keep that side pointed down. I probably won't be carrying this blade across the lab today, but if I did, I would point it down towards the ground so that if I fell or tripped or dropped it or anything like that, it would go into the ground instead of up where it might go into my face or another part of my body. And then when I cut with the scalpel today, I'm still going to keep the blade side down. I'm going to cut away from myself and whoever else might be standing around me, like a lab partner. It's important that you don't saw with the scalpel. The scalpel is not a saw. You don't have to drag back and forth. It's plenty sharp, I promise. And then it's also not an ice pick, so we don't stab with the scalpel either. That wouldn't be handy for your frog. And then the last tool that I have in my little toolkit here is my probe, and that will come in pretty handy today too. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this frog and see what we have to learn. Oh, brownies are ready. I'm just kidding. That's my goggle sanitizer. So the frog here, we're going to take a look at integumentary system first. When I feel this frog, I can actually feel that the skin is pretty rubbery. That rubbery skin helps with water resistance. Some of you may notice that your frog has some slits in its back legs and also at its abdomen. That's where the dye was injected into the circulatory system. So don't worry about those. I can also see, and if you take a look here, you can see as well, my frog has webbed feet. These webbed feet, along with lots of other resources, are what help your frog to escape predators. So this frog is kind of a darker, murky green color. We definitely wouldn't find this frog living like in the Caribbean Sea because clear blue water would not be this frog's friend. Every predator would be able to hunt it down, and every prey would see it coming from a mile away. So this frog lives in an area that has murky water. It's going to swim down towards the bottom of the water, but will also still need to come up for air because it's not a fish. It doesn't have gills. And so it's going to live in a very murky area where this color helps to camouflage it. You'll notice that the abdomen is a much lighter color because, again, if this frog is down at the bottom of the pond, we're talking about predators swimming over and above. And then when the frog swims up to the pond, if a predator is looking up at it, we're talking about sunlight shining down through murky water, so it needs to look a little lighter from the bottom. So that's our frog here. There are several things. So the webbed feet help to push water away, which doesn't just allow this frog to swim, but allows it to swim really, really well. So you can see this frog nearly has like see if I can turn this sideways where you can see it actually has kind of like a scoop to its feet where it can scoop that water out of the way and move really quickly through the water to escape predators or to catch some prey that it has found. It also, interestingly enough, on the eyes, and I think this may be difficult for you to see, but at the eyes there, the frog actually has two sets of eyelids. So the first eyelid is a transparent kind of see-through eyelid that the frog can close when it's underwater. And it's kind of like when you and I put on swimming goggles when we get into the pool, it helps us to see better. The frog has that same sort of structure, but it's built into its eyes, so it doesn't have to go down to Walmart and buy a pair of swim goggles, which is nice. The second set of eyelids is very similar to yours and mine, made of some of the same tissue as the rest of the integumentary system that it uses to open and close its eyes instinctively for protection and things like that. And then behind the eyes, I want you to take a look at this circular structure on either side. These are the frog's ears. So when you and I go underwater, our ear canal fills up with water, which creates this kind of muffled sound, which means we can hear underwater, but we don't hear very well. Our frog, because it has this tissue over the top of its ear canal does not fill up with water, and it can actually hear much better. So it can hear prey coming, it can hear predators coming, it can hear prey splashing around in the water. So the position of the eyes, the extra eyelids, the ear tissues, the webbed toes, the camouflage are all really great benefit to this bullfrog because it helps to protect it from any predators it might come across, but it also helps it to be a very stealthy predator itself when looking for prey. So the next thing that we're going to do today is I'm going to open up this frog's mouth, and we are going to take a look at the structures inside the mouth. Give me just a moment, and I'll take a look. All right, so taking a look inside this frog's mouth, the frog is pretty stiff, so it's a little bit of a challenge to get its mouth open. I'm actually going to pry open just a touch and then use scissors to cut through this jawbone here so that I can get it open for you and you can see a little better what's going on inside this mouth. So here we have our little froggy's mouth, and the first thing I want you to notice is the tongue here. The frog's tongue is much different than yours and mine. You can see I'm actually placing the probe behind the frog's tongue. So the frog's tongue is attached at the front rather than at the back of the mouth. It's different than yours and mine because what the frog's tongue does is it lays down inside the mouth like this, and this top side of the tongue is very sticky. So when a bug flies by, it actually flops its tongue out of its mouth so that the sticky side lands on that insect and it's able to suck it back in. Because the frog is able to do this, the frog's tongue range is actually much longer than yours and mine, allowing it to reach far outside of its mouth to catch prey. Here at the back, we can also see the esophagus. This is, remember, digestion begins in the mouth, so both chemical digestion and mechanical digestion are occurring here. We know that because if I feel along the roof of the mouth, I feel these two cushy things. Those are actually the back of our frog's eyeballs, but in between those two eyeballs, I can feel two small teeth in there, and I think if you look close, you can actually see them right here. Two small teeth that help with mechanical digestion, and then the frog under its tongue, just like you and I, has salivary glands that help with chemical digestion as well. So those are just some of the basic features inside the mouth that help with digestion and things. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling off some of the skin from my frog so that we can take a look at the muscular system. So I'm going to start here with the abdominal cavity. I'm just going to reiterate some of the skin removal that's already occurred during injection. So you can see here lots of muscles, and you can actually see where the circulatory system comes in and integrates with the muscular system to allow for movement. Because this frog is dead and no longer has blood circulating through its body, it doesn't have any oxygen getting to its muscles, so it's pretty stiff and it's kind of hard to move. But if it were alive and had oxygen moving through its circulatory system, then the muscular system would perform much, much better than it is currently. So the other thing that I want you to take a look at is actually a frog leg, because your frog has some really fascinating muscles in its legs. You know that the back legs of a frog are used for it to hop, but I'm guessing you've probably never seen just how muscular just how large those muscles are, and just how muscular your frog's legs are. So I'm going to see if I can cut through some of this connective tissue and let you take a look at just how athletic this little frog is. All right. Okay, so now that I've gotten some of the skin off of that leg, I want you to take a look. Keep in mind that these muscles would be used to help move the leg and the skeletal system underneath. So remember that these muscles are attached by tendons to the bones. You can see that hinge joint here in the knee, and that the bones are attached to one another by ligaments, and all of those processes have to work together to allow the frog to spread out its toes, to allow the frog to move those hinge joints and let it hop or swim through the water. Really fascinating stuff there. We could spend a lot of time talking about those structures and all the neat things they do, but we've got lots of other things to see. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scalpel here, and I'm going to very gently make an eye incision from the bottom of the breastbone all the way down to the groin, and then from one armpit of my frog to the other, and then from one hip to the other, and that will allow me to open up this frog and see some of the internal structures that we're interested in. All right, so one of the things that I forgot to mention about external structures earlier was actually about reproductive organs. So male frogs will not have a penis on the outside of their body. That's because frogs actually participate in what's called external fertilization, which is still sexual reproduction. There are two parents required for this process, one biological male and one biological female, but the male does not need a penis because he will not insert his sperm into the female's body. Instead, when frogs reproduce, the female climbs into the water and she actually releases her eggs into the water at the same time the male releases his sperm into the water. So the egg and the sperm will actually meet inside the water, and that embryo will grow into a tadpole that will then grow into a baby frog, all on its own in the world without any sort of parental supervision. So the male frog does still climb on top of the female's back. He does still mount her, but there's no sexual contact that's occurring there. He simply mounts her or climbs on top of her to position himself as close to her as possible so that he's able to fertilize as many of her eggs as possible. So you will often find, especially in the bullfrog, that the male frog has an extra pad here on the outside of his thumb that helps him to grab a hold of the female and climb on top of her back during reproduction. So before you open up your frog, you can actually take a look at your frog's thumbs and you can kind of make a prediction on whether or not you think this is a male or female. I'm actually cheating a little bit because I forgot and I accidentally cut my frog open. But looking here at this pad, I could make a prediction that this probably is a male frog. Now that I have my frog open, I've actually cut it open and I've removed some of the breastbone as well. If this were a fully developed female frog, all of this abdominal cavity down here would be filled with egg sac that would have, they almost look like little tiny seeds, like poppy seeds maybe. They're black and yellow in color, and they all those eggs fill up the egg sac here, and it takes up a large amount of the female's body. But the absence of those eggs tells me that my prediction is probably right, that this probably is a male. And as we continue through this, we'll see if we can find some testicles. But the first thing that I want you to take a look at in this dissection is this large blue organ here. So I'm going to preface by telling you these are double injected frogs, which means all of the blood has been drained from this frog after death. And its arteries have been injected with red dye and its veins have been injected with blue dye. The frog's blood, I want to reassure you, is not red and blue. Blood is red because of the red blood cells, but this injection allows us to see the arteries where oxygenated blood would move away from the heart and the veins where deoxygenated blood would move back toward the heart. So we see this large blue organ here, which tells us there's lots of deoxygenated blood present in this organ. And a lot of students, when we first open this up, assume that this is the heart. But in actuality, this is actually the liver. So I'm going to see if I can't do a little precise cutting here through some of this connective tissue. When you're doing your dissection, the clear tissue, just like with our chicken, is connective tissue. You want to be pretty gentle because you don't want to accidentally cut through an organ, but we can cut through that connective tissue and actually remove the whole liver. So this liver has 3 lobes. It is incredibly large, and if you actually look inside, you can find the gallbladder as well. It's usually kind of a clear color and it's full of a clear liquid. That is your frog's gallbladder, and then this is the liver as a whole. So I'm going to place that to the side and then let you take a look at some more of this little froggy. Now that we've got that liver out of the way, we can see a few more organs, but there's still this yellowy, stringy kind of stuff that's preventing some of our vision. This is actually fat body. Interesting enough, because frogs don't carry their babies inside the womb, female and male frogs will both have a relatively same amount of fat body, but in males, like in the human, the female's body is actually designed to store more fat than the male's because she will use that extra energy she has stored during pregnancy to help provide nutrients for her baby, and then also after birth while she's nursing her baby to help produce extra milk. So all of this is fat body that I am going to remove from my frog to kind of allow us to have a little better visual of what's going on here inside our frog's body. So all of that fat body I'm going to go ahead and remove. And now you can really see some of the digestive tract and the other things going on there. Remember that fat body is important to the frog. That is a storage of extra calories and nutrients that if the frog spends a day without finding anything yummy to eat, it can then use up some of those fat stores to keep its regular body functions continuing. So now I want to take a look, and it's kind of hard to see in this particular frog, but what you can see right here is actually the heart of our frog, and then to either side of that heart there are these purpley looking very squishy organs. These are the lungs, and the heart and the lungs are actually positioned very, very close to one another inside the frog's body because we know that our circulatory system and our respiratory systems work very closely together. So I'm going to see if I can remove this heart so we can get a little better look at it. Keep in mind, the dye kind of gives us some clues as to what we're looking at, because we know whether oxygenated or deoxygenated blood is entering that organ based on what color it is. This is, let's try not to cut into any of that right there. This is actually the heart of the frog, and you can see here major arteries coming out the top. And if you take a close look, you can actually see that each of the chambers is a different color based on whether or not it houses oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. So that's pretty interesting stuff, I think, kind of show you some of that. And then, of course, attached very close by are the lungs. The lungs actually will have, usually in a double injective frog, the lungs will have kind of a grayish purplish color, because remember that oxygenated and deoxygenated blood are both entering the lungs to allow oxygen to enter into the bloodstream and then allow carbon dioxide to leave through the lungs. And if you feel the lung, it actually is a pretty squishy, stretchy material. This is because of all those little alveoli that are located inside the lung that allow the lung to expand when air is entering the lung, and then allow it to contract when you are exhaling. So some of that is pretty neat. I'm going to get this other lung out of here as well, so you can kind of see what's left in there. So there's our other lung. You can see kind of a purpley bluish color to that lung, where different, and if you look really closely, you can see some of the red vessels that are running through there, where oxygenated blood would be entering the capillaries to be able to pick up oxygen on its way to the rest of the body. Really interesting stuff. And then the next thing I want to talk to you about is the digestive tract. Remember that digestion does begin in the mouth, and we talked about both mechanical and chemical digestion occur there. At the back of the throat is the esophagus, and in our frog, the esophagus is not very long at all. So when we look at the internal structures of our frog, we can see the stomach here. And that happens pretty quickly because our frog honestly doesn't have much of a neck. So what I'm going to do is I am going to separate the stomach here, because I want you to see that basically your digestive tract is one really, really large tube that runs through your entire body. As a matter of fact, if we could stretch out a human digestive tract, it would be excuse me, longer than my classroom currently is. So what I'm trying to do is just separate the connective tissue here to kind of give you an idea of just how long this digestive tract is. You'll notice that in this connective tissue there are a lot of vessels, and both red and blue. That's because, remember, once nutrient enters the small intestine, it's then absorbed through the intestinal wall and into the bloodstream. So we've got lots of blood vessels going on here where nutrient is entering the bloodstream. And then we get all the way down here to our large intestine. So take a look at this. Let's see if I can stretch this where you can see the large intestine is still connected to the rectum of the frog. This skinny piece is actually the small intestine, and then here at the end what you have is the large intestine. So that's a pretty long digestive tract. Keep in mind, the longer the digestive tract is, the more time the intestines have to absorb nutrients, and the more nutrients the body is able to get out of a single meal. So the length of the intestine is actually incredibly important to the digestive process. I want to take a look specifically at the stomach really quick. And And so I'm going to cut that off here. I'll take a look at it. This is the stomach of the frog. Sometimes there can be interesting things inside the stomach, but I want to open the stomach up specifically so that we can talk about chemical versus mechanical digestion. So remember that mechanical digestion is when a physical change occurs, and that chemical digestion is when a chemical change is occurring and we're making an entirely new substance. You can see here that the walls of the stomach, the inside of the stomach, is not smooth. It has lots and lots of ridges inside of it. Most students know that the stomach is full of basically hydrochloric acid that helps to chemically break down and digest the chyme that's in their system. That chemical digestion is where a whole new substance is made, which is why we call it chyme. But some don't understand that these ridges exist, that the stomach is actually made of smooth muscle, and that once food enters the stomach, that smooth muscle begins to contract, which churns and squishes and mixes up the chyme that's inside, and that is mechanical digestion. So those ridges really help with mechanical digestion, which means that chemical and mechanical digestion can occur at the same time in the same organ inside the body, and the stomach is a fabulous example of that. So then, of course, we have our small intestine here, which is where absorption of nutrients really begins, and you can see lots and lots of red and blue vessels attached there for nutrient absorption, and there is that for you. And then, of course, the last stop on the digestive system tract is the large intestine and the rectum. So I'm going to pull this out for you, and then you can actually see there's a lovely little poop inside that large intestine for us. Take a look at it right there. That's some feces from a frog. There you go. And then that is the large intestine. You can see not necessarily longer in length, but larger around, which is why it's considered the large intestine. All right, a couple of different things left here in our frog, and I can see now that this frog actually is a male because his reproductive organs are present to me. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a name. I am going to call him, let's see, what would be a good name for a frog? Let's call him Theodore. I think he's going to be Theodore the frog, and we're going to thank you, Theodore, for your service to our academic education today. Theodore has here, underneath his digestive tract, 2 testicles. These testicles help to produce hormones necessary for reproductive processes. They also help with the production of sperm, which is very important to the reproductive processes. So I'm going to be really gentle and separate that testicle for you so that you can see it. You can see this is a tiny little testicle. In a human male, the testicles are actually housed in the scrotum, which is an appendage that hangs off of the body. But again, because a frog participates in external fertilization, the structures look a little bit different because those external appendages are no longer necessary to insert the sperm inside the female's body. So 2 little testicles there. And then the last thing I want you to take a look at has lots of blood vessels going inside of it and has kind of a different shape, but these are actually the kidneys. Remember that kidneys are responsible for filtering any sort of waste out of the bloodstream. So these kidneys are actually pretty blue in color. You can see some arteries located there around the kidneys, but for the most part, they are blue because they are full of lots and lots of veins as opposed to arteries. So I'm going to try and actually get these off. Oh, no, not going to work. I was going to say I'm going to get them off connected, but that connective tissue just came apart. So you can see here the kidneys, and you can see that they are connected by veins, and there's a lot of blue dye here on the back where you can see capillaries coming into the kidneys to help with blood filtration, and then that would be connected to the urinary system that then allows the frog to urinate any waste. Okay, so now that we pulled out the kidneys, you can see most of the internal structures are gone from the frog. You can actually see the spine here at the back of the frog. Remember that the frog does still have a nervous system, so the frog has a brain inside of its skull, which attaches to the spinal cord, and then there are lots of nerves, and they're difficult to see because they're a little bit translucent, but there are lots of nerves that come out from the spinal cord of the frog and reach out into all of these organs that we've just removed that help with the general processes of all of that and make life possible for our little bullfrog here. So that is the basics of frog dissection and some of the major organs and organ systems that we've been talking about through the body system. So now you're going to want to take a look at your analysis page and work through some of the data you've collected today and write a conclusion. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those below in the comments or anything special you'd like to share with us. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you all so much for joining me today in the lab. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the lab next time.